Hi guys, you're welcome back to my channel. My name is Stella. I'd like to specially thank everyone that is already part of this family. Thank you guys, and if you're just seeing my video for the first time, kindly subscribe and become a part of this family because I post sewing tutorials and they are super detailed. Now in today's video, we're going to be looking at an updated and the easiest method so far of making a pencil skirt. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, we've made a pencil skirt before. I know, but you agree with me that learning never stops. So this is an updated method of making a pencil skirt, and trust me, I've tried this several times and it worked perfectly. Now, looking at the female body from the waist down, you will observe that the front is flat and we have the buttock at the back. So this automatically tells you that we should not divide the hip round equally, considering the fact that we have the buttock at the back, especially if you're looking at a perfect fit. Now, at the end of this video, I'm going to highlight the major difference between your final outcome when you divide your hip round equally and when you divide it unequally. Now let's jump right into the video. So we're going to be working with a waist round of 33.5 inches and we'll be dividing that by 4. So 33.5 inches divided by 4 will give you 8.3 inches, and we'll write that down. Take note, we divided the waist round by 4. Now the hip round is the major part of this video that I want us to pay attention to. So her hip round is 45 inches. Okay, the first thing you need to do is to go ahead and divide it by 4. All right, so 45 inches divided by 4 will give you 11.25 inches. Now, like I explained in the beginning, the human body from the waist down is not equal. Okay, so the front hip area is flat and the back obviously is not flat because of the buttock. So in this particular method, we're going to be dividing our hip round but not equally. Now we will have our hip front and our hip back. So the hip front, we will go ahead and subtract 1 inch from our hip round measurement that we have already. Remember, we first divided our hip round by 4 and we got 11.25. Now for the hip front, we will do 11.25 minus 1. Okay, and that will give us 10.25 inches. Now this is our hip round measurement for the front. All right, now let's move over to our hip for the back, and I will be calling it my hip back. Okay, so I'll go ahead and write it, my hip back. And to do that as well, we will go ahead and write down our 11.25, okay, and we're adding 1 inch to the back. So the difference is the 1 inch. Now for the front, we subtracted 1 inch from our quarter hip measurement, and the back we added 1 inch. Now I know you'll be wondering if the measurements are going to add up to our hip round of 45. So we'll simply do a quick math. We'll do 12.25 plus 10.25. That will give you 22.5. And if you multiply that by 2, it will give you 45 inches. Okay, so can you see that our division method is accurate? Now this is the measurement that we are going to be working with. So now that we have our measurements clearly stated, let's jump right into the pattern drafting proper. Okay, so here's the pattern paper that we're going to be working with, and if you pay attention, you will notice that they are not divided equally, okay, like we used to in our previous video. So I simply made use of our hip front and our hip back measurements that we got, okay, and I added just an extra 0.5 ease on the block. Okay, so that's how I got the block that we're working with. All right, now let's jump right into our drafting proper. So we're going to start with labeling. Now this is our front block. All right, I'll go ahead and write that, and here is the back block as well. Okay, moving on, we will need to mark our vertical measurements. So I'll come in with my tape and we'll start from the waist. Now automatically this line is our waistline. So from my waist to the hip length is 9 inches. From my waist to the knee length is 18 inches. And from my waist to the floor, okay, is 43.5 inches, and I'm also adding 0.5 inch to this. All right, so I already have that line drawn. Now I'll repeat the same thing on the back so that I can get a straight line. So I'll go ahead and mark my waist to hip 9 inches, waist to knee 18, and obviously we have the full length. Now I'll proceed to connect it using a straight line. Alright, and here we have it. Now we need to label these lines, and I cannot overemphasize the importance of labeling your drafts. Okay, so let's proceed. Now here's my hip length and this is my knee length. Alright, and the same thing applies to the back. Now let's go ahead and mark our round measurements. So I'll come in with our paper. Alright, and we're starting from the waist. So the waist round we're working with is 33.5 inches, and when divided by 4 will give you 8.3. And I have my tape placed on the center front, and I'll make a mark at 8.3 inches. We'll also add our 1 inch dart allowance to that, making it a total of 9.3 inches. Now remember our hip front. So our hip front is 10.25. and I'll go ahead and make a mark at 10.25 inches. Remember, this is the front skirt block. All right, now I'll go ahead and connect this using a straight line. And here we have it. Now there is also something else I'd like to introduce. So the whole essence of this updated video is for us to have an easier and a better way of drafting your skirt, especially if you've been having issues with blending your hip area. So from your hip line, you will come down by 1.5 inches. Okay, so from your hip length, come down by 1.5 inches, and I'm going to connect it using a straight line. Now on this, our new line that I just marked, you will go ahead and remark your hip front. Remember, our hip front from our calculation is 10.25 inches. So on this 1.5 inches line that we just came down with, I will mark 10.25 inches on that line. And here we have it. Now let's move over to the knee length. So I'm going to be contouring the skirt with 2 inches. Now contouring also means the same thing as tightening. Okay, so now I would like us to note that the 2 inches or your 2.5 is not constant. It entirely depends on who you're making the outfit for and the final outcome that you want to achieve. Okay, but for this particular dress, I'll be using 2 inches. So you will simply mark your 10.25 our hip front on that knee length, and you go inwards by 2 inches. Okay, that's what I did. Now we'll go ahead and connect it to our 1.5 inches line that we came down with. So I just did that. Now you will come in with your French curve and you will go ahead and connect. All right, so pay attention to the placement of my curve. Okay, this is one of the issues that I would like us to get correct this time. So I have connected it, and you can see how easy and seamless the curve looks. Now let's move over to the back. So before you mark anything on your back skirt or your back dress, you will need to contour your center back line. And to do that, I'll come inwards from the center back line by 1 inch. Okay, so I just came inwards from the center back line, and I'll go ahead and connect it to the hip length. Now you need to do this using a straight line, and here we have it. So all our measurements will be on this line. Okay, now we will go ahead and label the back block for better clarity. So this is the hip length and here is the knee length. Now let's move over to the waist round. Okay, so the waist round that we're working with is 8.3, which is a quarter of her waist. Okay, now I have my tape placed on the 1 inch contouring that we just did on the center back, and I'll go ahead and make a mark at 8.3 inches. I'll also add 1 inch data allowance to that. All right, now let's move over to the hip. Remember, from our paper, from our calculation earlier, our hip back is 12.25 inches. So I have my tape placed on the center back line, and I'll make a mark at 12.25 inches. Okay, so you need to get these measurements right. Now we'll proceed to connect from the waist to the hip, and we'll do this also using a straight line. And here we have it. Now, just like we did on the front, remember on the front we came down from the hip length by 1.5 inches. We're going to repeat the same thing on the back. So from the hip length, I'll come down by 1.5 inches and I'll make a mark there. All right, so I'll come in with my straight line and we're going to connect, or you can as well just extend the 1.5 inches line on the front block to the back. And this is it. Now on this line, I'll go ahead and remark my 12.25 inches, which is my hip back. Okay, so I have my tape placed on the center back and I'll go ahead and mark my 12.25 inches. Now remember that we contoured the knee length on the front with 2 inches. Now we're going to do the same thing, but on the back we're going to be dividing it into 2. So from the center back line you will come in by 1 inch, and from the side you'll come in by 1 inch. But the easiest way is for you to go ahead and mark your 12.25 inches, which is your hip back, on your knee length. So you mark your hip back first and you will come in by 1 inch from the center back. All right, I think it's more clearer this way. And from the side also you come in by 1 inch. Now this totals your 2 inches. Okay, and we'll go ahead and connect. So we're connecting from the hip to the knee length, all right, this way. And we'll also connect from the knee to our 1.5 inches mark that we have there. All right, it's almost the same thing with what we did on the front. And I'll come in with my French curve also, and we will blend this part. Now, like I said earlier, you need to pay attention to the placement of the curve. Okay, so this is it. Now I will go ahead and blend the center back area. Okay, you need to blend it. If not, it's going to bulge on the final outfit, and that's not what you want. All right, so let's label. This is the center back and the side back. Here is the center front and this is the side front. Okay, now I'll go ahead and extend my measurements all the way to the hem of the skirt. Okay, so let's start from the back. Now, if you have a long ruler, what you need to do is to simply go to the hem of the skirt and you will mark your hip back. Then you go inwards from the center back by 1 inch and you go in from the side by 1 inch, and you simply connect from your knee length to your hem. Okay, but if you don't, which is what I'm doing here, you will go somewhere in the middle and you will mark your hip back, which is 12.25, and from the center back you go in by 1 inch. From the side you will go in by 1 inch as well, and you can use your short ruler to connect. All right, so I like to always give this illustration so that even if you don't have a long ruler, you will still get the same result. All right, so I'll proceed to connect this and we will move on. And here we have it for the back. So let's move to the front. Now you go ahead and measure what you have on your knee length, which is 8.25 inches, and I'll simply mark it on the hem, and I'll also mark it somewhere in the middle since I'm working with a short ruler. Okay, so I'll mark it on the hem line, my 8.25, and I'll mark it somewhere in the middle, and I'll proceed to connect it. And this is it. Now remember to blend all your lines. Okay, these are the tiny things that affect your final outfit. Let's move over to the darts. Now we're starting from the front. The bust span we're working with is 4 inches, and I'll make a mark there. And from the hip length, I'll go upwards by 2 inches. I'll also measure the bust span at that point. All right, I'll come in with my straight line and we're going to connect it. And here it is. Now remember we added 1 inch as our dart allowance, so I'll divide that into 2 and that will give us 0.5 each. So I'll go ahead and connect my dart legs and we will move to the back. So this is it. I'm done with the darts. Now you will need to slope your center front by 1 inch. Okay, so I initially marked 1.5 here, but I later changed it to 1 inch. Now I know you'll be wondering why. The reason is this: the lower you go, the more the curve on that side, and most times I don't like it too deep. So 1 inch is perfect. The whole essence is for you to eliminate the bulge or the puffiness that usually appears around your front. So let's move to the back. Now I'll go ahead and make a mark on, I'll measure down my 4 inches bust span. Remember I placed my tape on the 1 inch back tightening that we did. Okay, the center back tightening that we did. Now to get a straight line, you will need to take your tape back to the center back and you measure everything you have there. From the hip length, I'm also coming up by 2 inches, and I'll go ahead and connect. Moving moving over to the dart legs, we added 1 inch as our dart allowance, and I'll divide that into 2. That will give us 0.5 on each side. So I'll proceed to connect it using a straight line, and here we have it. Okay, we are almost done, but let's label the inside of the block because we're going to be cutting off and our initial labelings will not be here again. So the more you label, the better. I'll always say that. And this is it. Now I'll go ahead and separate these 2 patterns so that we can do further alteration on each of them. Yeah. Here we have it. Now I'll keep the back aside so that we can do our alterations on the front. Okay, so I'll keep the back aside and let's start with the front. So the first thing we're going to do is to close the dart. Now the easiest way for you to close your dart is to raise your pattern paper up from the side towards the center. Okay, I'll say that again. So you close from your side to the center. It's a lot easier and your pattern will relax a bit better than closing from the center front to the side. Okay, so this is it. Remember, I'll go ahead and close it. Now I'll tape down my dart on the front permanently. Okay, I'll close it down permanently. All right, and like I'll always say, this is optional. You can go ahead and stitch down your dart on your fabric. It's your choice, but I always like to leave my front dartless. Okay, so this is it. Now we will need to connect our 1 inch slope. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just remark my 1 inch, all right, on the center front, and I'll come in with my curve ruler. Now we're using a slight curve to connect this. I'm connecting it to the side front, and this is it. Now I'll proceed to cut this out. And here we have it. The front block is ready. Now we'll keep this aside and I'll come in with the back. And here is the back. So the first thing you're doing on the back is to go ahead and slope your center back by 0.5 inch. And this will help your skirt to sit perfectly. Another point is that I'll be stitching down my dart on the fabric, and I know you'll be wondering because there are some of my videos where I have closed the back dart permanently, and most of the times I stitch down my dart on the fabric. Now I have tried this too, but I'll tell you that I like the final fitting that stitching your dart on the outfit gives. Okay, it's not that major, but I just like the result. Okay, so it's personal. You may try that. All right, so let's try and close the dart temporarily, okay, so that we can connect to the 1/2 inch slope that we marked on the center back. Remember, to close your dart, the easiest way is for you to raise the dart leg from the side towards the center. So you close from the side towards the center, and I'll go ahead and connect to the 1/2 inch slope on the center back line. Now the moment you close your dart, if you pay attention to your pattern paper, you will notice that towards the center back line tends to go up. Now this is what will happen if you do not slope that center back with 1/2 inch. Okay, you can use 1/2 inch, you can use 0.75. all right, so you need to take off this so that your skirt can sit perfectly or your dress can sit perfectly. Yeah. And this is it. I have connected it, and here we have it. So we're no longer going to make use of that tiny space at the top. Okay, now I'll proceed to cut out the back skirt pattern. Yeah. And here we have it. Now this skirt is going to have a waistband. Okay, so let's start from the back. Now I want the width of my band to be 1.5 inches. I'll go ahead and place my tape on the waistline, and I will make a mark at 1.5 inches all through. Afterwards, we will try to connect it. So to connect it, you will need to close down your dart just like I'm doing, and I'll go ahead and connect it. Better still, I will try and use my paper tape to close down that part permanently. Okay, because you don't need to stitch down your dart on your band. So I have closed down the dart around the band, and I'll proceed to connect it. Here we have it. Now let's go ahead and label the band. So this is the center back, and here is the side back. The more you label, the better. It's like a jingle now. And here we have it. Now I'll go ahead and cut out the back band. Now I'll take off the tape on the dart, okay, because like I said, I'll be stitching it down on the fabric. And this is it. The back is ready. I'll come in with the front pattern and we're going to repeat the same thing. So here's the front. Now we'll go ahead and mark our band width, which is 1.5 inches. All right, so I'll just mark it all round and I will use my slight curve to connect it. Here we have it. Now we will need to label the band as well. So this is the side front and here is the center front. I'll also write it the front skirt band. So I'll use arrows to indicate the joining line. All right. Now, if you don't use your arrows and you don't pay attention, you may join the waist area to the lower part of the skirt and that will not be good. All right. I'll also indicate my arrows on the back skirt pattern as well. Now I'll proceed to cut this out and here we have it. We are finally done. The skirt pattern is ready. Now in my next video, I'll be transferring this pattern to my fabric and we'll be altering the pattern to my desired skirt style. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you. Kindly subscribe to my channel, turn on your notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I post a new video. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Till meet again in the next one. Bye.
Yeah.